So, today we're going to dive into a really profound and honestly often invisible kind of suffering. It's a pain that so many people feel but just can't find the words for. We're going to get into the biology behind it to really understand what's happening inside your body when this happens. Does that hit home for you? Especially around the holidays or birthdays or any of those so called happy occasions. You know that feeling. Like you're walking through a minefield that nobody else can even see. You're supposed to be celebrating, but really, you're just constantly bracing for something to go wrong, for that invisible impact. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? There's this massive gap between what you're feeling and what the world has a name for. People might throw labels at you like, oh, you're just grieving, or it's depression. But you know, deep down, those words don't even come close. It feels like a full-body crisis. So this is the big question. Why does this specific kind of loss feel so radically different? Why does it feel so physical, like it's in your bones, in your cells, like it's this relentless event that just won't stop? Well, the answer, it turns out, is in our biology. Okay, so the first step, and this is a huge one, is giving this thing the right name. We're not talking about your garden variety estrangement here. The source material for this explainer calls this very specific, very traumatic event what it is: parental discard. And you have to understand the difference. It's night and day. Estrangement, well, that's often the slow drift. It's sad, but it happens. Parental discard, that's not a drift. It's a demolition. It's engineered, it's one-sided, it's sudden, and it's absolute. The two just aren't in the same universe. Let's be really clear on this definition. Parental discard is the engineered, unilateral erasure of a parent. And having that specific language, my gosh, it is so powerful. It validates the entire experience. It separates it from a simple family squabble. This isn't two people drifting apart. It's a targeted removal. So how does this become a physical thing? This is where we reframe the whole conversation. We stop looking at it as some kind of emotional failing and start seeing it for what it is, a legitimate biological injury. Because the wound itself is literally physical. This comes from some fascinating science around what's called maternal brain plasticity. Get this, when you become a parent, your brain isn't just emotionally changed, it is physically rewired. Hormones like oxytocin and dopamine create what the source material calls a lifelong biological superhighway directly to your child. And this isn't some poetic metaphor, this is neuroscience. That bond is physically built into your operating system. And what happens when that superhighway is blown up? Well, it triggers something called betrayal trauma in reverse. Think about it. Step 1. Your body's blueprint, your deepest instinct, is to protect your child. Step 2. The betrayal. The very person you are hardwired to protect becomes the source of profound harm. So what happens? Step 3. Your entire system, your biology, registers this as a mortal threat. And that is why you might feel that constant humming anxiety, that jumpiness, that feeling of being unsafe all the time. That's not in your head. That is your body's threat detection system screaming at the top of its lungs that you are in mortal danger 24/7. It's not a weakness. It is a completely predictable response to having your primary biological bond catastrophically severed. All right, this next part is, I think, one of the most powerful insights from this whole framework. That confusing, chaotic, emotional state you might be in, it isn't just one thing. It's actually two very different physiological events happening inside you. And I want you to really hear this. You are not losing your mind. You are experiencing the two distinct faces of this very specific trauma. And just being able to tell them apart, that's the key to feeling like you have some control again. So before we put names to these states, let's just look at the raw experience of what the source calls a live wire attack. Does any of this sound familiar? That sudden, overwhelming feeling of primal terror, the shaking you can't control, tears that feel less like sadness and more like a physical release, those images that flash in your mind, maybe a deep groan that comes from your core, and then afterwards feeling just utterly and completely depleted. These are not just feelings, they are physiological events. So here's how it all breaks down. On one side, you have what's called the heavy blanket. This is that chronic, low-grade, heavy state that's driven by dopamine withdrawal from the broken bond. And on the other side, you have the live wire. That's the acute trauma attack. It's a massive, physical discharge of trapped stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. They feel completely different because they are completely different.
And just knowing which state you're in, that's the first step to managing it.
Okay, so we've identified the problem, we've looked at the biology, we have names for what's happening, so what now? Where do we go from here? Well, let's talk about the map out of this chaos. By understanding this biological sequence, you literally move this whole experience out of the land of confusion and into the world of science. This map, this understanding, is the foundation for everything that comes next. It's how you start building a real toolkit for recovery.
Now, for anyone who wants to go deeper into this framework, the full manual, the protocols, everything we've touched on today is laid out in the source material, which you can find exclusively at parentaldiscard.com.
And a quick but important note here, the framework and all the terms we've been using today, like parental discard, are protected intellectual property. Any unauthorized use or distortion of this content is a violation of that copyright. It's really just about protecting the integrity and the intention of this important work. So we'll end with this question, which is really a hopeful one. Once you can identify if you're under the heavy blanket or in a live wire state, you start to gain power over it. You can learn to reduce the electrical charge of the memory. And isn't that the goal? Could this knowledge be the very first step toward transforming a painful, constant reliving of trauma into a manageable remembering? That's what this is all about.